All right, welcome to the Life with Joey Calvo podcast. I'm Joey Calvo. Our podcast is on the World Podcast Network with over 1,200 podcasts and over 12 genres. Help vote us onto the leaderboard by going to https://worldpodcast.network. And again, if you have a podcast of your own, you can join for free. Today, our guest is Keeper Catran-Whitney. We're going to discuss about emotional health as well as his book Helplessness. So, Keeper, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Joey, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate being here.
Okay. So, how did Keeper get to where we're at right now?
Okay, Keeper, I am the author of the book Helplessness. It is book one of a 3-book series, from helplessness to hopefulness to happiness. Helplessness is about the emotional health challenges brothers experience once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. And how I got to this point was in 1977. My family, we were very popular singers. We were with United Artists Records. And in 1977, that was a golden year for us. We were doing concerts, we were doing magazines, we were doing interviews, and we had made the coveted Billboard's top 100 not once, not twice, but 3 times. Mm-hmm. It is also the year that Motown had completed their exhaustive 3-year search to replace Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, who they had lost 3 years earlier to Epic. Mm-hmm. And the family that they settled on to replace them was my family.
Okay.
And so we are on the midst of finally coming out of abject poverty. I went to 11 grade schools before I graduated high school. I lived in 21 different places, homeless 3 times. So my family was very poor, a family of 10, 4 boys, 4 girls. I am the second oldest, my mother and my stepfather. Mm-hmm. And we were incredibly poor. I know the life of going into the streets and having to get bottles and turn those in for a pound of ground beef or a bag of rice, or constantly going to parks to get government cheese and milk and eggs and things like this. This was my life growing up. And here we are on the cusp of singing greatness because of the popularity that we had here in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. So we are going to sign a contract, the largest new artist contract Motown offered any group, larger than the Jackson 5, larger than the Four Tops and Supremes, the Temptations, Smokey Robinson, larger than all of those groups. We're going to sign this contract on this upcoming Thursday or Friday. This is in the summer of 77. Mm-hmm. So we're all excited. We can't believe what's about to happen to us. So the Saturday morning, and I'm going to take us there, the Saturday before, my oldest sister, child number 3, screams upstairs, "Boys, come downstairs, family meeting." This is it. We're about to learn where we're going to sign the contract. It's Thursday or it's Friday. Motown had also created a TV show for us, the pilot TV show, which I have the script in my office to this day. And I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be the day. This is going to be the moment. All the days of not having any food and just moving and being evicted, all those days are about to end forever. So I run downstairs. The house that we were living in was being furnished by United Artists Records. They paid for our home. They paid for our food. They paid for our car. They paid for our clothing. They paid for everything because we couldn't do it. But we had already paid dividends for them on the album that we had produced with them. So they were very happy. Yeah. So I go downstairs into the family room, the living room. And when I enter, Joey, the far end of the couch are my 3 youngest sisters. They are the 3 youngest of all 8 of us. Mm-hmm. The 2 youngest are twins. And my sisters are doing something really odd. They're sitting in the far end of the corner of the couch, and they're not saying a word. There's nothing but silence. Wow. And I'm thinking, okay, what's wrong? How come they're not excited? Why aren't they happy? At the other end of the couch are my 2 youngest brothers. Mm-hmm. They're sitting there, but they have a look of confusion on their face like I do. Like, why aren't the girls saying anything? Why is it so quiet?
Right.
As you enter the living room, my oldest sister was pacing back and forth in front of the archway, and she is pissed.
Mm.
Okay. She is normally upset with my mom. They were getting into it. In fact, earlier that day, my mother and my four sisters were going back and forth from bedroom to bedroom, and you could hear arguing going on, but I didn't know what they were doing. It was just the girls
Right.
doing what the girls do. But why is she still mad? My oldest brother is standing at the far end of the couch behind my three youngest sisters, and I lock eyes on him. And we just kind of shrug.
Mm.
Okay. Within a minute of me sitting on the couch between my three youngest sisters and my two youngest brothers, my mother and stepfather enter the living room.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think it's important that we take a little quick pause here and tell your viewers and your listeners what we are about to talk about can be very triggering, can be very challenging emotionally, because what we are about to get into is child sexual abuse and how it impacted me and my family. In fact, Helplessness is about my family story from a brother's perspective. It is the first book ever talking about the subject from a brother's perspective, what happens to us emotionally when we learn about this. So protect yourself at all times while listening to this. Joey's podcast will be here. You can always come back to it.
Yeah.
But be mindful of who you are and what you're dealing with emotionally.
Yeah.
So with that said, my mother and stepfather entered the living room. Now my stepfather's 6'6", 250 pounds, and he wore a huge afro wig that put his height over 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
There's a brown recliner in the middle of the living room. He immediately goes to the recliner and he sits down, bends over, and puts his face in his hands like that.
Mm.
And my thought is he sick? Okay. My mother, who's usually very bubbly, very effervescent, outgoing like her 8 children, is not saying a word. In fact, she has a look of anger. She's pissed. And as she entered the living room, I could see her taking a quick glance at my oldest sister. And if looks could kill, they would have killed each other in that moment.
Wow.
It turns out what they were talking about all morning, my brothers and I are about to learn about for the very first time.
Okay.
This secret that has been going on for at least 6 years. Wow. 1971. In fact, 1971 is the year we started singing. That year on a Saturday, we were rehearsing and the phone rings. My mother answers the phone and she says, hello? And she looks at us and says, shh, Michael Jackson's on the phone. That Michael Jackson. Wow. He wants to speak to my brother directly underneath me. And my brother gets on the phone and says, hello. He's all excited, hangs up and says, Michael Jackson said he's heard of us. Says for us to keep going. Says for us to do not stop. We'll get there someday. That's 71. And so now jump cut to 1977. We are about to replace them at Motown.
Wow.
We're about to step into their shoes.
Wow.
So here we are in 77. We are about to learn, but my mother is not happy. She is mad. She walks to the center of the room and stands in front of a plate glass window that overlooks outside. And when she spins around, she scans and looks at her 8 children. Face is, she's seething. My sister's conversation with her earlier that day, as I was going to mention a second ago, was about this moment. My brothers and I are about to be hit with 3 emotional earthquakes.
Wow.
Earthquake number 1. My mother says, and keep in mind, the only people who don't know about this are me and my 3 brothers. She says, your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years.
Wow.
And emotionally, I start dropping I am being hit with emotions I couldn't even tell you the names of what they meant, but I'm dropping emotionally because she's now telling me words no brother could ever expect to hear, the words no brother could ever prepare for. And then she hits us with earthquake number 2. She says, I have known all along.
Wow.
Wait a minute. What did you say? I'm really slow on the uptake because I'm being emotionally paralyzed. The trauma is engulfing me. But I hear a couple of words. I hear liquor store. I hear park. I hear apartment. Wait, what does all this mean? And I don't know what to do. I'm a brother, and I've just been told that my stepfather has been molesting my sisters, and my mother's known about it. And then earthquake number 3, the one that does the most damage to me and my brothers. My oldest sister, who's pacing, turns around and points a finger at her 4 innocent brothers and says, you can't talk about it. It didn't happen to you. You can't talk about it ever. And like that, relationships between brothers and sisters that were so tight, Joey, they were just on the living room floor in shambles. So
I would believe that. I would believe that. I mean, because from what you're saying, and the timeline that we're looking at is, I was just a baby when this is all happening. 1971, I was just born. So and then coming up to 1977 when this is brought out, and I'm 6 years old, and hearing about a group that I could have heard musically, is falling apart.
Yeah. So helplessness, what helplessness is about, and hopelessness and happiness, it is to give rise to brothers, to bring us into a conversation that we're always left out of. Because when the exposure happens, you hear from the predator, or you hear about the predator, or you typically, oftentimes will hear about those people who empowered them. And many times you hear about the victims, our sisters, but no one ever asked the brothers, are you okay? Do you need to talk?
Right.
Do you need anything? How can I help you?
Right.
And in our situation, which is often the case for many brothers, and I've spoken to hundreds of brothers who know exactly what I'm talking about, have experienced the same thing. We are told you can't participate in the conversation, but you are expected to answer for your non-participation by the very people who could help us not only understand, but help us with our healing process. In 1977, you could go into a bookstore, Joey, and you could find a book written by women. Unfortunately, you could find thousands of books, and you could find articles. You may even get a documentary. You may even get a movie or an interview on, one of the TV shows. But in 1977, there was nothing for brothers, and nothing has changed today. So I look to bring brothers into the conversation, because after the shock and the guilt and the disbelief and the anger and shame settles down, we are still stuck with our trauma. We still need our emotional healing. We still need to have someone create tools and systems that will allow us to heal. Obviously, it is a conversation that is primarily controlled by women, and that is because historically what men have done for women or done to women over the years when it comes to sexual abuse and even child sexual abuse. But there is the group that no one ever asks about. And so this is what I do. I look to bring brothers into a conversation where we are taboo or an inconvenient truth. No one wants to hear from us. And so that is what I do. That is what helplessness is all about. And just so people understand, in writing helplessness, it took me 10 years, and it took me 45 years to finally get to my sisters and find my self-esteem and strength to be able to even talk to them about it after being told for 4 decades that I can't.
Mm-hmm.
But today, after all that we went through as a family and all the inner turmoil and the battles emotionally and mentally and spiritually, I have great relationships with 3 of my 4 sisters. In fact, 3 of them actually contribute to the book.
Okay.
2 of my brothers contribute to the book. So you get a full family view of it, but you also get to see how
Mm-hmm.
we were able to move forward as a family and heal. And, you know, we continue to do our healing. We continue to have our conversations, but it is possible because when brothers are told they can't talk about it, what we are told and what we hear is that we don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Our feelings don't matter, that we are not victims, when in fact we are most certainly victims.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it's shocking, but I can't say amazing. But I mean, it's a shocking fact, that you find out things in life, that throw you for a curve, and then it turned around and literally sets you up for what's going to happen in your life.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's
Well,
something that we all have to look into. We all have to really look into, our lives and seeing things that, we don't know that's going on. And sometimes we need to bring it out, because if we don't bring it out, we hold it in all this time.
Right.
It's how can I state this? You're holding it in so long, and you're taking it to your deathbed practically, that if it doesn't come out, it's going to kill you.
Exactly.
So I mean, pardon me, and even in my own personal life. But I mean, mine is not more of what has happened to you, and again, I do apologize that happened to you and everything. But not really, but still, I still throw a butt in there anyway. But we are all learning our own issues within our own life, and just like you said, 45 years later, you're coming out about it and bringing it all out. I'm going to throw a little personal anecdote out that just happened, matter of fact. Now, I'm 53 years old, like you said. Like I told you, everything that happened to you from 1971, and, when this was all starting, to, 1977, when the facts came out. I mean, I just turned 53 in March. It took me 53 years and 6 months to find out issues within myself, and I'm before I go on about my little ordeal thing, and I apologize if it doesn't coincide with what happened with you. During after that time, did you look into getting help about it and managing how to deal with it and so on? Because in my life, yes, I did, but most of the therapists are always like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I had a psychiatrist, and this was within the past year. When I told him I did this podcast, he turned around and literally said, "This podcast is your therapy."
Mm-hmm.
And I started to learn during that time that it is. So during that time, from 1977, when you were told all of this happening, to when things started to come together for the book, did you try to get help to like I said, to maintain?
Well, yes, I did. So let's go back to 1977. Once we learned about it, as I said, there was no support system or tools for brothers, period.
Mm.
In fact, there really are no support systems and tools for brothers today. You can go and find family therapy or individual therapy on your victimhood, you being a victim of child sexual abuse. But when it comes to brothers, no. So to directly answer your question, I went to a number of therapists. I went to a number of counselors and told them, I am a man and I'm still dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do? And to a person,
Mm-hmm.
every counselor told me, I can't help you. And my question is, why not? And their response is, I have never heard of anything like this. If you were a woman, if you were a direct victim, but I've never heard of the trauma brothers experience and holding it in. I don't know what to do with that. You're going to have to go to someone who specializes in that. And I tell them, there is no one who specializes in this. My book is the very first book that talks about what brothers go through and what we carry. And everyone told me, there's nothing that I can do for you. Mm-hmm. And so I tell them, okay, hold on a second here. Wait. Let's imagine that instead of learning that my family has just come out with this deep, dark secret, we're driving down the street and we're in a car crash and all 9 of my family members, my 3 brothers and my 4 sisters, my mother and my stepfather all die. I'm the only one left. I have, once again, lost my family. Is there anything you can do to help me? Oh, yes, sure, I can help you with that. I said, well, this is the same thing. I've lost my family. I'm carrying the burden of guilt and anger and betrayal and self-blame and shock and disbelief and fear and anxiety, confusion and crisis, all of it. I still carry all this. And you're telling me you could help me with that because it involves a car, but you can't help me with this because I'm a brother whose family he has lost. There's nothing that I can do for you. And they have all run the other way.
Wow.
The burdens, the challenges of this, because my book is the only one that talks about it, so it's a new conversation for everyone in child sexual abuse and sexual abuse in general, is my challenge for many people is you are collateral until I tell them, well, in this instance, it's more to the story because my story is very broad, but a lot goes on. But I tell them in 1966, when I was 6 years old, I was sexually abused by my babysitter almost daily for 6 months. So I understand what it's like to be the direct victim and understand what it means to be an indirect victim as a brother. So I understand both sides. To your point, you mentioned that the trauma that brothers experience with something like this can go on and on and on. It was 45 years.
Yeah.
What really brought home how much damage is being to brothers as we carry all this in silence is 5 years ago, my father-in-law passed away. Wow. My father-in-law is white and he's Jewish. He grew up in New York, in Brooklyn. He grew up in a middle-class family that did well. He went to school, he went to college. I grew up here on the West Coast of Los Angeles, and my family is very poor. And so we are, in many ways, diametrically opposed lifestyle-wise. So one day he calls me, Joey, and this was 3 years before he passed away, and he said, I want you to come to the house. I need to talk to you. I said, okay, Dad, I'll be over in a few minutes. I get there, walk in. I say, hi, Dad, how are you? What is something wrong? Do you need me to fix anything for you? And he said, no, I want you to have a seat here at the dining room table. When I walked in, I immediately noticed my mother-in-law was not there, which was really odd because they're always together. They're never separated. But here we are, just he and I.
Yeah.
And he says, have a seat at the dining room table. I want to talk to you. And I sit down and he says, I want to talk to you about your book. And he starts patting my book. I had no idea he had read my book.
Wow.
No idea. And he says to me, I want you to know I understand.
Wow.
And I sat back and I said, what do you mean you understand? He pats the book again. He says, I want you to know I understand what you are dealing with. And I said, oh, Dad, oh, okay. And he says, I'm going to tell you something I have never told anyone. Because what we're talking about crosses race, it crosses religion, it crosses politics, it crosses wealth, it crosses social economic, it crosses education, it crosses every line you can think of. This is not about race. This is not about religion. This is about brothers. Brothers.
Yep.
In the broader sense. Because the woman asked me yesterday, are you just talking about black guys? I'm like, no. Why do you do? No, I'm talking about brothers. And so my father-in-law says, I never told anyone this except your mother-in-law. I've never told your wife, my daughter, or my two other daughters. And so I'm sitting back like, okay. He then says, when I was a little boy, around 12 or 13 years old, we lived in New York and we lived in a 2-story apartment. We lived downstairs. Our neighbors, our best friends lived upstairs. We were so close, we never locked our doors. We could go in and out of each other's apartment all day, anytime, day or night. It made no difference.
Right.
We could always go in, and that's how we were. We were like that close as family. And he says, one day, my mother or my father, I don't remember, sent me upstairs to get something. And so I immediately went upstairs. Okay, let me go get this. And I walk into the family's apartment. No one is there. I don't hear anything. So I'm thinking, oh, all right, let me go get what they want. But then I heard a sound coming from the bedroom. And now his son-in-law, I'm getting nervous. I notice my father-in-law starts to cry.
Wow.
He says, I opened the door and the father of the family who we were best friends with is molesting my sister.
Oh my God.
I looked and I didn't know what to do. I turned around and I went downstairs and I didn't tell anybody. I didn't say a word to anybody. When my sister came downstairs, she knew I saw her because she saw me in the doorway. We didn't say a word. We never talked about it ever. 2 months later, it happens again, and now he is crying. He said it happened again, and again, I did not say anything. He then says, I want you to know I understand the trauma and the pain you are carrying as a brother, to not be able to have this conversation, to not be able to talk to anyone about it. What that showed me was, here is my father-in-law, white, Jewish, 95 years old, sitting across from his black son-in-law and saying, I'm in pain. I am still carrying this burden. I need you to see me. I need you to understand. I need to tell someone. He didn't need to say anything, but he's still carrying this. And my point is, brothers carry all this in silence because we have nowhere to go.
Right.
And I am looking to bring people into a conversation so we can create tools and systems for brothers that help us heal. And it just can't be you just go to any family therapist. It needs to be people who understand and are able to extrapolate from what we are experiencing and help us create healing processes for brothers.
Right.
Because I understood when my sister said you can't talk to us, she was protecting herself and my younger sister. It took me a long time.
Yeah.
But when I spoke to my father-in-law and subsequently other men after that, we are carrying so much of this in darkness, so much of this in silence. And we, like you said, are going to carry this to our grave. And yet we need someone to talk to
Right.
about this.
Right. Wow. I do have some questions. We have this podcast has a number one fan, and I'm gonna bring the person up. Okay. She is the number one fan, number one supporter of this podcast, and she always has questions for most of my guests. And her name is American Fox. And so the first question that she had for you is, how did you get involved in writing?
How I got involved in writing is 2013. Now, I've never written anything, okay, before Helplessness. In 2013, I saw an ad by Lisa Nichols, who's a very popular motivational speaker and author, well known, very well regarded. She had an ad that came across my Facebook page saying that she was going to conduct a seminar in San Diego on how to write a book in 20 minutes. And so at the time, I'm pretty big in network marketing. I'm companies like Avon, Mary Kay, Amway. I'm doing very, very well. So I decided, okay, I'm going to write a book that talks about how to approach a younger market, because the industry really needs to get old. So I go there. But as I'm going there, I'm being pulled towards something bigger than just this network marketing book. I feel the tug because I have felt the tug for 45 years. And I just kept running from it. No. My sisters are going to get upset. They're going to be pissed. They're going to be mad. How dare I do that? But I knew my family story could help people as opposed to ending in tragedy. And that's what I kept front of mind the entire time. It could help. It could help. It could help. Sisters and brothers understand and help each other. So I get down to San Diego. And on the last day, they start asking people who has a book idea. And I raise my hand and I'm called up to the stage and I tell the idea and the room goes silent, because what came out of my mouth was not the network marketing book. It was helplessness.
Right.
It just poured out. The room was silent. And after I was done, I went back to my seat, still not sure if I have it within me to write this. But within seconds, I'm swarmed by so many women who are saying to me, you need to finish this book. You need to write this book. I wish my brother had known. I wish I had talked to my brother. He wanted to know. More men need to hear about this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I am overwhelmed by all of this attention. And I run outside, still thinking, okay, I can do this. But then the doors open and more women surround me. But it was 3 women, separate, who did not know each other, who told me I should have spoken to my brother because he needed to talk to me and I wouldn't let him do it. Those 3 women told me their brothers took their lives over the trauma of not being able to help them. Because not only can we not ask about it, we are told we can't do anything when our protective instincts overwhelm us.
Right.
And so we're dealing with all of this. And so I decided at that moment, I am going to write helplessness. But I had a scary thing I had to do first. I had to let my sisters know.
Yeah. Wow.
And that is what kicked it off.
Okay. So that leads to this last question from American Fox. How is the feedback to it?
Helplessness is it is a book that has a lot to it. The feedback has all been incredibly positive, because the feedback always comes back, be it from a sister or from a brother's experience. I had no idea. That's the response from women. I had no idea my brother was dealing with this. I had no idea that he has been carrying this all this time, because oftentimes they think we don't care. they think we don't want to talk, but it's because we're told we can't talk and we are locked down emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And for men, the response is thank you. Finally, someone understands, because we walk around thinking we are alone with this because no one ever talks about it. We talk about what happens to our sisters or women, or we talk about the predator, as I said earlier, or we talk about the people who empower them, but no one ever asks the brothers, do you need anything? And so when men see this, they're like, oh, I thought I was alone, which was my father-in-law's response. He thought he was alone until he read it. So that's the response. It has been an incredibly positive response.
Okay.
In a weird sort of way.
Okay. For those that are into superheroine, real life superheroines, and you want to get to know American Fox, you can read her on X, formerly Twitter, at American Fox 4, or on Instagram at American Fox 12018. All right, so Keeper, we're gonna go back to the book a minute, and like you said, it took 45 years for it to come to fruition. Since the book has come out, and you mentioned to me about even in the emails, because if you ever get an email from Keeper, this is what he writes, as in closing, as on the bottom: survivor, author, speaker, kick activist. So I was like, okay. Now, even now, as I looked at that, I was like, kick activist, interesting. But I'm seeing, or I think I'm seeing, in reference to the kick activist, have you thought of setting up like, like a counseling center type? Have you thought about that? And like ideas of that as you were writing the book, or even after you wrote the book?
After I wrote the book, the idea of that, people started asking me would I be interested in creating a nonprofit that helps create these processes or tools for brothers that help brothers and sisters understand each other and have a broader conversation. Because oftentimes brothers are viewed as enemies simply because what's between our legs is what's between the legs of the predator. And so through gender proximity, as my sisters did to me and my brothers, we were guilty. And in order to overcome that challenge as well, we need to have some sort of place that we could go. So yes, I've thought about a global counseling center, getting people involved in the conversation, looking for those people who are interested in creating some sort of nonprofit. I've had a number of conversations, and I continue to have them to see who is willing to get in on something like this.
Okay. So now we have that brought out, and you, how long after, and I'm gonna go back to 1977 after you were told this was all happening, and I mean, I would probably figure that the deal with United Artists kind of fell wayside right after that, and I'm sorry that happened, or I think that happened. But how long within that 45 years, even though like you're all in shock because of what had happened, how much longer, or how long did it take for that bond to start to build back up? I mean, within the 45 years, I'm saying, like during that time, were you still, reaching out as a family, even though, this secret's high, you're holding this thing in the back of your mind? But how much longer did the family really stay together between that time in 1977 until, you wrote the book?
Well, from 1977, keep in mind, we were still under contract with United Artists. We owed them over $250,000.
Wow.
So we had to, in some way, in some formulation of us, continue. My oldest sister and one of my younger sisters are twins. They immediately left. And so, but we knew we still had to eat and we still had to find a way to live. Otherwise, we're back out on the street. So some of us continued to try to keep going, even as my mother, who said she would handle everything, did not.
Right.
So quite miraculously, because we had to keep going, we ended up getting on Billboard again.
Wow.
And yet, as a family, we are ripped apart, and we would still, see each other and be around each other. But from a brother's perspective, you would still hear from our sisters, how come you didn't hear? How come you didn't see anything? But that's part of the process. We're not supposed to be. And part of the process of not hearing anything is them being held in check by my mother and stepfather, who are saying, if you say something to your brothers, I will hurt you. I will hurt them. Or we will end the contract and you won't be able to blah, blah, your futures will be destroyed.
Right.
And so my sisters didn't say anything. So what ended up happening when my mother said, and all this is in the book, there is absolutely nothing that I do not leave out, because it is a brother's story. It is a story of my failings, my challenges of trying to get back to my sisters in the midst of being told I can't do anything or talk to them. Mm-hmm. My mother saying that she would handle it, and my sister said, okay, we will let mom handle this. It took 9 years before I had enough. Even though I still had not spoken to my sisters, it was just eating away at me. My self-esteem was taking a hit. My self-worth was taking a hit. And I'm like, okay, but I'm going to get married in 1986, which is 9 years later. And 3 months before my wedding, I just couldn't handle it. I just had to do something because I could not get married knowing my sisters would still be vulnerable.
Right.
So on a warm summer night in 1986, I'm talking to my fiance, who has been my wife now of 38 years. And I said, I need to go to the house. I have to handle something. Because my mother had let him back in the house.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, I have got to do something. I cannot leave him there with them. So I go back. So I tell my fiance, and she says, is there anything that I can do? And I said, no, I have to handle this. Like I said, I'm losing weight. I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating. So I go to the house, and there's an upstairs bedroom. There are 2 bedrooms upstairs. There's my mother's bedroom, and there's another bedroom. So I go upstairs to the other bedroom, and I'm waiting for a sound because I know he's there.
Right.
But I'm going to handle this today.
Right.
On this day, one of us is going to die. And I was so okay with it. I was so okay. Either I'm going to kill him or he's going to kill me, because my protective instincts, my shame, and my feeling of betrayal of not handling this for them, even though they said don't do anything. I'm a brother. And as a brother, my definition of a brother to a sister is to protect their honor.
Right.
And it hadn't happened yet.
Right.
And I just couldn't. I'm going to die this night, and I'm good. But even that is kind of crazy thinking, Joey, because if I die or I kill him, my sisters are really going to go down trauma-wise, because they're going to start blaming themselves. But at this point, I don't care, and I don't tell anyone. So I wait in the bedroom for 2 hours, and I have the instrument of his death and then I finally hear the sound, the door opening at the far end of the hall. He's coming out. And this is it. I'm in this room. I'm sweating. I'm scared. He's 6'6", 250 pounds. I'm 5'8", 145 pounds. He outweighs me by 100 pounds. He could snap my neck easily. I'm not tall enough to look over his shoulders. That's how much larger he was to me. And honestly, when my mother said she was going to handle it, The honest truth was, okay, it was a warm blanket. Admit I didn't have to confront him. And I know this. And I'm just, how can you do this? But they said, don't do anything. How dare you? They said, don't talk to them. And I'm just going over and over this for years, honoring what they said, following their demand, as brothers do. We are going to, okay, our sister said, don't do anything. But God damn it, I've got to do something. So he comes out of the bedroom, and I meet him halfway in the hall.
Yeah.
And I look up to him, and he's tall. And I look up and I say, you have 24 hours to leave this house. If you're still here by this time tomorrow, you will be dead because I will have killed you. And I turned around and I walked back to the bedroom. And I grabbed the bat that I have that is going to bludgeon him. I'm going to beat him to death. And I hear footsteps. And I'm standing back, waiting for the door to open. But it never opens. The footsteps are fading. They're going the other direction. And I'm like, okay. But I have to come back tomorrow and make sure he's gone, because I leave and go to my fiance's and she says, is everything okay? And I said, I won't know until tomorrow. I have to go back tomorrow to make sure. So I go back tomorrow, the next day, and I have my bat with me. And I'm walking up the walkway and I get to the front door and I decide at the last minute to leave my bat outside because I don't want to agitate a situation any more than is necessary.
Right.
Because I know if I kill him, I'm going to be put to death in California for premeditated murder.
Right.
If he kills me, he's going to be put in the gas chamber and he's going to die for murder. So either way, but I leave the bat outside. And I open the door, and I'm expecting to see his 38, silver 38, pointing directly in my face, but there's no one there. I walk through the living room, I walk through the dining room, I walk to the kitchen, and then I finally hear a sound coming from the back of the house. I go to the back of the house really slowly. And keep in mind, I did not tell anyone because I didn't feel it was important. I needed to do this on my own. I didn't tell my brothers, didn't tell my sisters, told no one. In fact, I didn't tell anyone until maybe 10 years ago when I told my wife what I did 10 years ago. I opened the back door and opened that bedroom door, and my younger brother sitting there, he's working on some music. And I said, is he still here? And he said, no, he left last night and he has not been back. He was gone.
Wow.
But I had gotten to a really, really dark place. You know, which is where a brother can go. We want to destroy, we want to kill, we want to do all of these things. Because when men are having these battles, it's not little kids in school. It's life and death. So he was finally gone, but I knew I had wasted 9 years and for me, it was, even though I was instructed by them not to do anything, I knew. So after that, like I said, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my sisters. They didn't know how he got out of the house until they read my book.
Wow.
They said, oh, I thought mom got him out. You did it? And I said, yes. She said, and they all said, how come you didn't say anything? I said, it wasn't important. I needed to handle this for you. I needed to do it for me as well. I didn't need to broadcast it. He was gone and that was it. And I went about my business in the hopes that you would also feel free and not be scared anymore. It wasn't important that anyone know that I did it. And so we went through a lot. We ended up, my mother, during this whole process, this whole period of 45 years, she traded one of my sisters for a van for a night from a rich Arab guy. So we even had sex trafficking. And I'm learning all this as I'm writing the book. I'm learning all this as I'm writing the book because I'm talking to my sisters and they're telling me more and more and more.
Wow.
So one of my sisters said, I will tell you what you wrote in your book because you imagined so much of what was happening to us without us telling you. Everything you wrote was spot on. You were
Wow.
absolutely correct in everything you imagined. And that's another part of it for brothers. We vividly imagine our sisters being pulled into a dark closet, hearing the
Wow.
zipper go down, hearing the pants drop. And as a brother, you imagine these things. You imagine so many things happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
And come to learn what I imagined happened multiple times.
Right. Right. Well, so
So you're psychologically and emotionally trying to deal with all this, and trying to regulate yourself emotionally, but helplessness is to let people know this is what brothers deal with.
wow. So in closing, you what you're saying now is that not only was there the sexual molestation on your sisters, but later on, as you're in adulthood and on your own, kind of, that your mother turns around and sells one of your sisters to
Yeah.
to live off of. I mean, wow.
And my sisters are keeping all this quiet. They don't want their brothers to know because
Mm,
they know what we are liable to do. We are liable to kill someone, and they
right,
did not want that on their conscience. And
right,
so it's just part of the trap of being a victim, and it's part of the trap of being a survivor, knowing all this stuff. So I understand, as I said, because I am a survivor myself, and I'm also a direct victim myself, and there's just so much to it. And the hard part is, how do you get to a place of healing? You need to find someone that you can talk to, very much like your podcast becomes therapeutic.
mm-hmm,
And the more I realized as I was writing helplessness, there was this healing taking place.
mm-hmm.
Does it mean that your podcast or my book is going to completely heal us? No, it doesn't. That's
No,
not what happens. But it empowers us to step in
yeah,
and claim our space. And this is who I am, and this is
yeah,
what I'm about. And the more we can share our personal stories with the world, and this is for anyone, the
yeah,
more you can share your trauma, the more you help other people live through you,
mm-hmm,
and then help themselves heal, because they
right,
can see themselves through you, and hopefully they can say, you know what, I can do what Joey did.
right,
I can do what Keeper did as a brother. My sisters,
right,
other women could read and say, oh, I
mm-hmm,
can see the evolution of their relationship over the course of 4 decades, and how they got from don't talk to me to this loving relationship
right.
now.
Um, in closing, because we're coming up towards the hour, um, you had mentioned about your late father-in-law, and that he never told your wife or anyone outside of your mother-in-law about what had happened in his life. Did she ever find out about what happened with him?
Who, my wife, his
Yeah.
daughter? Oh, yeah. Yeah. He said, you can tell people after I pass away.
Okay.
which
So
is which is a if you think about it, is a stunning statement from someone 95 years old. He's still afraid of what people are going to say about him some 70, 80 years later, that he says to me, once I pass away, you can tell this story to anybody, it will help your story. But he's still carrying the guilt and the shame
mm-hmm.
that at 95
Yeah.
he doesn't want anyone to know, because he's in pain.
Okay. So my last question in reference to that now is, being that you did it on a written it on your perspective, have you thought about expanding it to showing that it's not just as we would state it, a black thing, but more of a biracial thing, to where it's not. It doesn't just happen to African Americans. It can happen to Caucasians, Asians, etc.
Well, as I pointed out, my father-in-law, he's white and he's Jewish, so he's definitely not black. But it has always been an interesting point of view for me, because I had spoken to a guy who said, so your book says the emotional challenges brothers go through. Is this a book about black people? And I'm always taken aback by that, because if I were white, no one would ever say, is this a book about white guys? No one would ever question that.
Right.
If it was but it's because I'm black and we're used to hearing brothers.
Right.
What's up, brother?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? They immediately jump to, this is a book for black men. It is not. It is a book, as I said, that encompasses the reality of every race, religion, economic standing. Every country in the world deals with this.
Right.
So part of broadening the conversation is, if you're going to look at me, the author, and simply look at it from such a narrow lens, oh, this is just a black guy talking to black guys, you are not willing to accept the fact that it happens in your race as well. And unless we can get past that, the ability to broaden the conversation becomes a little more difficult.
Yeah.
The more I talk about it, the more people, and I have, since March, I have been booked for over 150 interviews. People want to learn about it. Schools, churches have contacted me. Can you talk about this? Because they understand, as I said, it crosses everything.
Right. Yeah, because when you first explained it to me, when you first told the story about it, and the word brothers, of course, first thing I would assumed was that. But then when you brought out, when we went to the father-in-law, it got me to realize, now it's really not just this rate, just this type of,
it's not just black people
all across the board.
Yes.
So now when you really look at brothers at it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are or what you are. It's what's within that. That spirit. And what's
my father-in-law, in telling me this, gave me a gift. That helps me broaden the conversation, because, as I said, he didn't have to tell me. Right. But he gave me a gift that allows me to bring this information, or a gift of knowledge, to everyone. And he and I, we became incredibly close. Right. And this is not about race. This is about people. Right.
Well, like I said, that's what I was trying to state. It's not more of a racist thing anymore. It's really, more of, society itself, we could say. If only society knew back then what could be done, today could be a different, different perspective of it. But, of course, no, we had all these things in between. So in closing, Keeper, how can people reach out to you and get a hold of the book?
Well, people can get the book on Amazon. It's Helplessness, the Emotional Health Challenges Brothers Experience. If they want to reach me directly, because I do a lot of speaking, not just in interviews, but I do live event speaking and keynotes on this subject. They can reach me at keepercw.author@gmail.com, or they can go to my website, keepercatran-whitney.com. And if that doesn't help, they could always come to you. You know how to reach me as well as anybody. And they can always go to you, Joey.
Yeah. They'll leave comments like, "How can I reach out to him?"
Well, I know more about this.
Yeah. I mean, like if I showed you the person who had the questions for you. Now, I mean, back then, if this was going on, all you had to do was contact this person. I would have handled everything for you back then.
Right.
I'm going to throw it out at you. As we're closing, were you into superheroes growing up?
Very much so.
Yeah. I was too. I was into Wonder Woman and all that, but I had to bring that out, being with the person that brought up the questions, because she is a real life superheroine. So I had to at least peek that in there. I know I'm gonna get trashed for it later. Like, why did you bring up a superheroine when this guy is talking about what happened to him 50 years ago, and you're throwing out about a superheroine,
No, it's all good, because my superheroes are my sisters.
Yeah, right.
Because they allowed me to have the conversation. They contributed to the book. They are my heroes, and so
right.
There are your heroines right there.
Yeah.
And so and I'm very much still into superheroes and superhero movies and all that stuff all day.
Yeah. Well, we could turn around now and look at it from this point of you actually being a superhero of your own now, being that you are, we've gone over the hour, and I do apologize for it. You're looking at what happened to you all this time, and you're bringing it out, and you're now getting to the point where, like, hey, if this happened to you, come share it. Bring it out. Don't hold it back. And I always tell people, never hold back their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you hold them back, it, like I said, it kills you. And so keep her in your own way. If you really think about it now, being that you mentioned that your sisters are your superhero, you may need to look at yourself as a superhero too, because you took that step of bringing it out and introducing it and saying, hey, we need to do this. We need to really expand it out. So in a way, you became your own superhero too. And I thank you very much for bringing that out.
If that's the case, I'm a superhero with a lot of faults. I guess I belong in the Marvel universe. Every Marvel hero has something. And so, I don't want my family story to end on the dunghill of so many family stories like this over time. My family story is meant to heal. Where we thought it was going to be music, we were brought together. I fully believe this, to go through what we have gone through, as tragic and as dark as it is, to help other families and other brothers and sisters. It is weird to say that, but that's what I believe we all 10 of us were brought together to do.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, and as you explain the story and the fear inside, you had to take action, and if you didn't take action, nobody's going to say, you need to do this. You had to tell yourself, hey, I can't let this go on. I've got to step up and say, you know what? I got to bring it to the forefront. I got to introduce this, and society has got to really look at this. Because,
well, at the end of the day, I really wanted to bring my sister some closure, and I know we don't have time to go into it now, but in 2021, I brought them the closure they were looking for. So, I just am trying to help. That's really what this is all about.
Right. And I thank you, Keeper, for bringing your story out to us today, and explaining about the book, and explaining about the closure that actually, did happen through that time, not only through your sisters in the end, but through you as well. because as you wrote this book, you kind of gave yourself that closure that it had to come out. You couldn't hold it any longer. So, you did the best thing possible in your life, and we thank you for that. We thank you for sharing your story. We thank you for, any music that I'd never heard maybe back then, even though I was like 6 years old when you were, with United Artists. But I thank you for introducing us to knowing that there is another piece of another issue within society that should be looked at.
Well, that's very kind of you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much again for your time. I apologize that we went over the hour again, but this conversation had I wanted to bring out more because if we didn't, like I said before, it's like, holding things to your grave, and if it doesn't get presented, it's never going to come out. Yeah. So, Keeper, thank you so much for bringing it out, and hopefully people will reach out to you and, share their story to maybe where you might turn around, come back on this podcast and say, you know what? I got a collection now, that I can share, or this is what happened. We created this center to where a lot of people came together and brought their stories of, like yours, and even what happened even afterwards, what your mom did. I mean, that totally shocked me. Thinking, why would my mother do this? What was in her mind? And maybe we have to look into what was in their minds when they were doing this. Like you brought into, like you showed what was in your mind going through all this. So again, Keeper, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And like I said, hopefully people will reach out to you and, maybe even share their story. And for those that I couldn't get it fast enough to put the website on, you can always comment on here, because I get the messages when people comment on these live stream podcasts. So if you comment about it and reach it out, I will be happy to send it to you through the YouTube comments. And I thank everybody for watching this podcast. Keeper, again, thank you. And God bless you all.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You
You're
take care.
welcome.